Good morning, student. Now, today we are going to learn about chapter 6, that is New Economic Policy or Economic Reforms since 1991. So, here we are going to learn through this meaning of economic reforms, then new economic policy, then appraisal of the LPG policies. So, here let us go through this meaning of these economic reforms. Now, here in this meaning, the new economic reforms. This refers to the set of economic policies directed to accelerate the pace of growth and development. So, as I told you in 1990, what happened? The India was standing at a very high fiscal deficit. So, it was the condition that India has to opt or open its gate for the other economies so that they can make the investment in India. And this is how we were planning now for our growth and development of the country. Now, in 1991, the government of India initiated a series of economic reforms to pull the economy out of the crisis. So, why we adopted it? Because we wanted to get out of this crisis of 1990. So, these reforms or the changes came to be known as New Economic Policy. NEP is a short form of it. So, here in this process, we are going to learn about liberation, which is denoted here by L, and here privatization, then globalization. P means privatization, G means globalization here. Now, here licensing. So, initially, the licensing was compulsory for many of the industries. Now, afterwards, what happened after 1991? The licensing was made very easy and it was not compulsory to obtain license for each and everything. So it was a liberal process afterwards. Now a strictness was gone over here now for this licensing process. Now in this second point we can say that in place of quotas, okay, LQP policy was there. In the beginning it was LQP actually. So this LQP here was replaced by this LPG. Okay, so here everything was very complicated before 1991. Like permission for this licensing was very rigid. After that, there was some quota restriction. Here it is denoted by this Q. This Q here, it denotes that quota restrictions for that. Means if you want to import some goods, like earlier in the earlier chapter we learnt about this IPR also. So IPR means industrial policy resolution, so of 1956. Okay, in year 1956 happened. So in it we learned that there will be some quota restriction, means you cannot freely trade with the other economies. So there were some quota restriction regarding import and export. Then here in the third point, it discussed the policy of globalization in place of permits for the export and imports. So if you, here we are simply referring this permits, means for export and import you'll have to take permission from the government. Now it was again very critical process, but in globalization it was a condition that you can freely trade with the rest of the world. So this was the concept of globalization, means all the economy can easily trade within India. Before that what we were doing, we were not allowing the other countries companies to enter into India or make any kind of investment. So after that globalization, when this thing happened, it was like a free flow of investment by the other companies into in India. And today you can already see that there are so many companies of the other countries in our India. Like if you talk about any company like Samsung is there, or even like Honda is there, Kawasaki is there. So many companies are entering in this market. Even some Australian and European companies can be seen, like Volkswagen, German companies there. So why this happened? Because of this globalization. So they also started investing in India and they started their own plants here. Means it is called as FDI, foreign direct investment. They'll be making investment in India along with the controlling power, that is called as FDI. Okay, so we'll be learning it one by one. We'll understand what is the meaning of LPG here. Now this was just a brief intro. Now here in the second point, the elements of the new economic policy, that is LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization. Okay, so these are the three main elements of this policy. So what is liberalization? Let us first discuss and throw some light on this liberalization. So liberalization means freedom here. Freedom from what? Here, the liberation of the economy means freedom of producing units from direct or physical control imposed by the government. Means the attitude of the government before 1991 was simply to control everything on the production. Even the prices were being controlled by this government. So even if your productivity can be increased, suppose your company is having a good production capacity, then also the government was putting restriction on your production capacity. So there was no freedom. Along with it, the licensing was also very critical. Licensing was also compulsory for most of the things. This was another problem with this a strategy of the government, because before 1991 the government attitude was very different towards the things, because government thinking was very simple. At that time they were thinking that if the public enterprise will come forward to take all this kind of action. In the earlier chapter we already discussed about this, that if the companies like public company will be there, so there will be welfare in our country. So that is why the government companies were coming forward. Banks were in the hand of the government before 1991. Even the companies which were established, most of the companies were doing welfare according to the government. So that is how they started after 1951. Means they were just simply making 5-year plans every time, and they were focusing on growth and development by simply the help of these government enterprises or public enterprises, which was not later on successful. Okay, now here, before 1991, the government had imposed several types of control on private enterprises in the domestic economy. So here also they are referring to that there was some restriction which was imposed on the private companies in the our economy, means in India domestic economy. So this included industrial licensing system, price control, financial control on the goods import license, foreign exchange control, restriction on investment by the big business houses. Now you can already see there are so many restrictions here. Licensing system was very rigid. Then price control means you will have to sell at a higher price than the government. Means government product will be available in the market at a lower price, and your product will be available in the market at a higher price. Then here, financial control on the goods. So financial control was also will be there according to the government will be controlling most of this finance, that how much finance you can take from the market, and how much you can invest, and according to that you can decide your production capacity. Means simply, if you want to increase the production capacity of your company, it will be a difficult task for you. Then import license, if you want to import something from outside, then definitely, suppose, see, if you're importing something, you'll have to obtain this import license, of course, because see what happened at that time. If you're going to import something, then you'll have to pay foreign exchange to the other country. Means you'll have to pay them in dollars maybe. So here the problem is that the foreign exchange will be going to the other countries. Okay, so in this last chapter we already studied that we were having very no closed economy type, because we are not trading that much, because our export and import was very low in the initial stages, simply because we were not interacting with the other rest of the world or the other countries of the or the economies of the world. So here our export and import was very low, and we had to actually just apply for this importing license. Whenever you want to import something from other economies, you'll have to get this license. Without it you are not allowed. And also this licensing, getting this license was very difficult task. Okay, so that license will not be easy at that time. Then foreign exchange control means, foreign exchange means converting one currency into the another currency. So that is foreign exchange, which means it was also control. It was not an easy task to change everything very easily. It was not like that. So here the foreign exchange control was there. Then restriction on the investment means, big houses, means even if some big houses want to invest in your company, it was like a restriction, because they will not allow you to increase your production capacity that much. So it was again a kind of thing that in your investment you can get the investment from some good financial institutions, but the government will may not permit you to get those investment, because simply the government thinks if you will get the investment, you will increase the production capacity, then it will be like you will be making profit, and you will not do the welfare of the country. Because simply, what was the thinking, the private company will simply do the profit making, and they will not think about the welfare. So that's why they were not allowing even investment at that time, or very low investment they allow. Now, in the second point, it was experienced by the government that several shortcomings had emerged in the economy on the accounts of this. control. Now what happened afterward, later on, government realized that because of this attitude of the government, the country is facing a lot of problem. So here they thought that they will have to change, maybe in the future they will have to change, because there was some shortcoming means they thought that the public enterprise will alone bring this development and all this growth for the economy. But what happened, it turned out to be a failure for them, because they thought that it will be a success for them, but unfortunately they were not able to perform. Because what happened, the attitude of the government employees was very lazy towards the work, and they worked with inefficiency, all these government companies. So because of that they were just a kind of failure. And later on in 1991, everything was privatized, means more private players, means private companies were focused on their growth and development, and the government also allowed them to do the production in their own way, and bring this employment and growth to the country. Okay, now the fourth point, the growth rate of GDP has fallen sharply, and high cost, here high cost economic system rather than a low cost competitive economic system came into being. So what happened, the growth rate of GDP has fallen sharply, and it was a kind that there was a high cost economic system. Suppose if you want to take loan, so it will be you will be getting that loan at a very high cost. Okay, now after this, in the view of these facts, the liberation of the economy was considered as a key component of new economic policy. The greater reliance was to be placed on the market forces of supply and demand rather than the checks and control. Now what they were doing here, the new economic policy was simply relying on the market forces, means everything will be happening in the market now according to the demand and supply of the goods. So here it will be less check and controls over the companies, and it will be like the complete discretion of the companies, private company, like means they can simply do the production in their own way according to the demand of the product. Whatever you want to manufacture, you can manufacture and do the production. So it was a very good thing. So this liberalization is the main component of this new economic policy. Now examples of developing country, Korea, Thailand, Singapore, they have achieved rapid growth due to liberalization. So already these countries, Korea and Thailand, all these countries, they already adopted this liberalization before than us, and they able to achieve a very good success, and a rapid growth was seen in their countries. Now here the first point is industrial sector reforms. Meant what was the changes which were made in the industrial sector. So abolition of the industrial licensing. Okay, so in July 1991 a industrial policy was announced. It abolished the requirement of the licensing except for the following five industry. Now here the licensing was not necessary now, except some critical production commodities like liquor, means liquor in Hindi we call it sharab, and all this kind of stuff which are not good for health, like cigarette. And defense is, this can also not be privatized, because if you're going to give this defense in the hand of the private companies, so that it will be a condition like everybody will be having gun in their hand, because they want to do the profit maximization, they will sell gun to everyone. So this defense and all these equipments, all this for all these things, if you want to manufacture, the licensing was still hard. So this all these explosives, means RDX and all this kind of explosive items, if you want to deal with, or chemicals you want to deal, or drug you want to deal, or opium you want to deal, so all this, for this the licensing was there, means the control was still there. But for the rest of the commodities, the licensing was made very liberal. Now, straight away after this abolition of this industrial licensing, except these few articles, the second change which they made was the contraction of the public sector. Means under the new industrial policy, number of industries reserved for the public sector was reduced from 70 to 8. So in 2010-11, the number of these industries was reduced merely to two: atomic energy and railway. Now what happens? See, now we can see that the public sector, see, public sector means what? Government companies. So government companies were having in their involvement in each and every sector. So now what happened is, initially what happened, this government sector was having control over each and every sector. Now today you can see that all these 17 sector, like in this 17 sector, today the government is there only in two sector now, that is atomic energy and railway. Means in rest of the things you can see the involvement of the private also. Like sector, when we say sector, so understand this sector first. What is the meaning of different sectors? See, this atomic energy you can see here, railway you can see here. After that you can see this chemical will be there, chemical sector will be there, automobile sector will be there, maybe some banking sector will be there, insurance sector will be there. So in this banking and insurance sector you can clearly see that there are private banks also, even there are some private insurance company also beside LIC, which is a public enterprise. So now you can see that the involvement of the public sector was too much in the initial stages before 1991. Later on, what happened? The government allowed the private players to enter into this sector and do the business. So, in banking sector, insurance sector, all this sector, the private companies also started doing their business. So this is how it was reduced from 17 to 18. Then later on in today's time, it is just restricted to this atomic energy and railway. Now even they are talking about this privatization of railway also now. So it can be a condition like railway will also be given into the hands of the private, or maybe some private entrepreneur you will see in future that they are taking care of railway, or maybe another train will be there in as a competition, as a competitor of the railway. Like already there is a train called as Tejas, I think, which is already there in the competition with this railway. But it is not like, because still the government is having monopoly in the railway, but in future we can see that change. Now third point is de-reservation of the production areas. So here what this point means: see, many production areas which were earlier reserved for the small scale industries were de-reserved. Forces of the market was allowed to determine the allocation of the resources rather than the directive policies of the government. So here what happened, the government was having some reserved area for this small scale industry. Now these areas are being dereserved, and whoever want to occupy that area for making or doing the production or any kind of thing, so they are simply allowed. So these areas are now de-reserved. Now, fourth point, expansion of production capacity. So, as I told you earlier, that the production capacity, the government was having this control over this production capacity. Means if you want to produce more and you are having production capacity, the government will tell you not to produce more and not to utilize your entire capacity, because if you do that, what happens, your cost of production will come down, you will be able to sell more. And the government was saying that I will be doing welfare, so you are not allowed actually to do production. But what happened after that, the government agreed in this liberalization that you can increase the production capacity. So here this change was made. So earlier production capacity was linked with the licensing. Now freedom from licensing implied freedom from capacity constraint. What to produce and how to more much to produce was now a matter of producer's choice, depend on the marketing condition. As I told you, now the companies were freely deciding that how much they want to produce in according to the demand of their particular product. So no, nothing will be done from the side of the government. Like government is not going to interfere now in the matter of the private companies now. So this was the thing here in this fourth point. Now after this, the fifth point says the freedom of import of capital goods. So in liberalization also implied the freedom for these industries to import capital goods with a view to upgrading their technology. So permission was no longer required from the government to enter into international agreement for the import of technology. Now here, suppose if any company is there, it want to import just a kind of technology from the other country, so they now don't have to take any kind of permission here now from the government whether they can do it or not. Now they can freely import the kind of technology here. Okay, any kind of industry. So for any kind of capital good which you want to import from the other countries, now this is, can be seen that the permission was not to be taken now. So it was a great ease for the industries after 1991. Now the financial sector reforms. So financial sector means the banking system, of course. So financial sector includes all these banking and financial institutions. Okay, financial means banking and financial institutions are simply made to provide the finance to the companies. Now what are the changes which are made here in these areas? The stock exchange market and foreign exchange market. Okay, now in India the financial sector is regulated by the RBI. Okay, now Reserve Bank of India is the controller, or you can say that it regulates or control the activities of these financial sectors, especially the bank. Now liberation implied a substantial shift in the role of the RBI from a regulator to a facilitator of the financial sector. Basically, what was the job of this RBI is to regulate the market, means to control all the things. Now it has been also a facilitator now, means it just facilitates the activities of the financial market, means they will be going for providing loan to the banks, and banks it helps the bank to do the business, and they will be providing loan to the companies on all these kind of industries. Now, as a regulator, the RBI, prior to the liberation, would itself fix interest rate structure for the commercial bank. But as a facilitator, after a liberalization, the RBI would only facilitate the free play of the market forces and leave it to the commercial bank to define their interest rate structure. Now, as I told you that RBI was controlling everything, so all the interest rate were being decided by the RBI. But today, if any bank wants to lend the loan to some industry, so they can decide their own rate of interest now. So after this, we can see that this now the competition rather than the control rules the decision making process. Means here what this bank are doing now, bank are taking their own decisions now. Suppose if you see that there is a rise in the repo rate in the market, so it is not necessary that the bank will also change their rates, lending rates. There are chances or possibilities that the government is not, sorry, not the government, the bank are not going to change their rates. Okay, like government maybe RBI decided to drop the repo rates to make the loans cheaper, so maybe the bank will not drop their lending rates. That is not a compulsion, means they can do freely what they want. So it was kind of condition which has been changed here in this financial sector. Now, free play of the market forces led to the emergence of private bankers, both domestic and international as well. So, in this banking industry, some foreign banks also entered. Like you can see today, HSBC Bank is there, Citibank is there, Barclays, Standard Chartered. So many banks, Goldman Sachs is there. So all these kind of banks have entered the Indian economy now. So there was some emergence, even some private banks like SDFC, ICICI can be seen here. Now, liberalization has also allowed the FIS, means foreign institution investors, in to invest in the Indian financial market. For example, FIS means what, merchant bankers and mutual fund and pension funds, means all these financial institutions like mutual fund and all, they can easily invest in our country. So here the foreign institutional investors can easily invest in the Indian financial market, that is on the BSE or Bombay Stock Exchange and NSE means National Stock Exchange. They can easily invest their money in our Indian markets. Now consequently upon these changes, the financial sector in India has shown a multi-dimensional growth and is playing a significant or important role in the growth and development of the country. Now here just simple summary is given that financial sector has given multi-dimension. So here where the changes are made, first of all discuss this. Here this foreign institution investor, that here they are talking about Indian financial market. Okay, so Indian financial market means stock market. So one changes can be seen there. Then another change was seen in the banking industry, like private bank also jumped into this phase. So it really helped that now when this kind of bank will enter into India, so the problem of finance can be removed because they will be providing finance to most of the firm, and this is how an industries can easily come into Indian economy, and many industries will be there, will be setting up their business in India, and they'll be doing very good kind of business in India, and they'll be providing employment opportunity as well. Now, considering upon these changes, the financial sector in India has shown a multi-dimensional growth, and we already, so no need to do this point. I think it is good till here. All this pension fund and all, that means you should be understanding all this kind of thing, like what are financial market and who is investing in it. Now after this, the fiscal reforms were there. Now here after industrial reform and financial reforms, now it is time for fiscal reforms now. So fiscal reforms refers relate to the revenue and expenditure of the government. Means from the one side the government is going to get some money, that is revenue, and that money will be spent on the as an expenditure by the government. Basically this thing refer to the budget which is being made by the government. So tax reform are the principal component of this fiscal reforms. So when you say that fiscal reforms is there, so definitely you are somewhere referring to the taxes in our country. Now here broadly taxes are of two types, direct tax and indirect tax. So direct tax are those tax which of the burden of which cannot be shifted on the others, means income tax and wealth tax. Means suppose you are having a PAN card by your name, so definitely that income tax to the government will be paid only by you and it cannot be paid by somebody else. That simply means that your burden of this tax cannot be shifted on somebody else. Now what is indirect tax? Like when you buy a product, so already you're paying MRP. So MRP include that's indirect taxes. So indirect taxes can be shifted on the burdens of the other. Means indirect taxes are paid by the companies and company add the taxes value in their prices. And when you purchase the product from the market, actually are paying that tax to the government. So this is how the government, the taxes which is been paid by the company to the government, this company collect the tax from you because they're adding that tax in the MRP. Okay. So here it is levied on the goods and services, and all these taxes are the burden which can be shifted onto the others. Like GST is there, goods and service tax, custom duty. One who pays such tax, like a shopkeeper paying GST on good and service tax to the government, can shift the burden of this tax onto the final buyer of the goods. That is why I was telling you, when you purchase a good, actually you are paying that tax as well, which has been already paid by the shopkeeper maybe, or by the company. So this is how they are collecting tax even from us, because we are also buying so many goods from the market, and actually when we buy we pay the tax also, which is called as indirect tax. So burden of such kind of indirect tax can be shifted on the shoulder of the others. Means direct tax burden cannot be shifted, but indirect tax burden can be shifted from the one shoulder to the other shoulder. Now, before or prior to liberation, tax structure in our country or economy has been highly complex and evasive. Fearing the heavy burden of taxation, people was evading taxes. Now, tax structure has been simplified and moderated. This has raised the tax compliance. After, therefore, the tax revenue of the government has been increased. Now, what happens? Initially, in the beginning, what happened, the टैक्स कैन बी इवेडेड, मीन्स टैक्स चोरी बहुत आराम से हो सकती थी, बट अब वो बहुत मुश्किल से हो सकती है आफ्टर दिस इम्प्लीकेशन ऑफ दिस GST एंड ऑल. So simply this is just a kind of change which is made by the government, and this had led to the collection of more taxes by the government. So this GST was a good move by the government now. Now this fourth change, or the external sector reforms or the changes. So here the external sector reforms includes the foreign exchange reforms and the foreign trade policy reforms. So foreign exchange reforms were initiated in the 1991 with the devaluation of the Indian rupee against these foreign currencies. So in this foreign exchange reforms, what happened? Our rupee was devalued against the other foreign currency. Means what is the meaning of devaluation? Suppose today for $1 you are paying 70 rupees, and now the government decided to devalue our currency. Now for $1 there will be 80 rupees which you have to pay. So here you can see that the Indian rupee is losing the value. This decision has been taken by the government. It is called as devaluation. Okay, this process is called as devaluation. So this devaluation was done against the foreign currencies here in 1991. So basically what happens, why this is done, the question is there. See, when the people will say or see that in the initial stage for $1 they were able to purchase 70 rupees goods and services in India. Now for the same $1 they can get or purchase 80 rupees of goods and services from India. So here the export of India will rise. Okay. Now devaluation implies a fall in the value of rupees to the dollars or the British pound, any currency it may be, which means that the US dollar, the British pound can be exchanged for more rupees than before, or implying that US dollar or the British pound can buy more goods in Indian market. So the same thing here been referred to this external sector reforms or foreign exchange reforms, that this is how the devaluation helps to generate this export in the country. Now after this devaluation, what happened? Followed by this devaluation 1991, the exchange value of the Indian rupee in the international money market or foreign exchange market was left to the free play of the market forces. Now presently exchange rate is determined by the forces of supply and demand in the international exchange market. Means they are talking here about the foreign exchange money market. Means here now everything is up to the demand and supply. Means if there be more demand of any currency, so that particular currency will be having a great demand, means it will become strong in the world. So this is the kind of system. Now everything is according to the supply and demand now. Now, foreign trade policy underwent a substantial change in the wake of liberalization. Now, foreign trade policy, this has been a substantial change now in the wake of this liberalization. What happened here? The tariff restrictions have been considerably moderated, rather withdrawn from many items of export and import. Now there was tariff means taxes, so there was some taxes upon some of the goods. Now removal was there. The tariff structure was also now very liberal, and most of the tariff was been reduced from the goods regarding the export of import of many articles. So now this is the kind of change which has been taken place in this liberalization process. So because of that also the trade now is now very simple, and many goods are being exported and imported in our country. Now instead of the policy of protecting the domestic industry, now there is policy of survival for the fittest. Now what happens, see, inside this India, now all this domestic industry are not given protection by the government. Now everything is left up to that particular industry. They will have to perform well in a country, and this is only how they can survive, otherwise they will not be able to survive. So now there is no protection for them. Now, market competition has replaced the policy of quotas and tariff. Efficiency is the benchmark of the growth and not simply expansion. Now, this is just a general word, so don't focus on these kind of things. Now, the privatization process. So, what is privatization? So, privatization is the process of involving the private sector in the ownership or operation of the state-owned enterprise. Means what happened here in privatization, the shares of the public enterprises were sold to the private players. Okay, यहाँ पर जो गवर्नमेंट कंपनीज के शेयर थे उनको प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को बेच दिया गया था, प्राइवेट कंपनीज को जो जो लॉसेस में रन कर रही थी उनको रख के कोई फायदा नहीं था. सो सिंपली गवर्नमेंट ने क्या डिसीजन लिया कि उनको हम प्राइवेटाइज कर देते हैं, मीन्स हम उसको प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को सेल आउट कर देते हैं, क्योंकि उस पर पैसा और लगा के मतलब नहीं है, वो ऑलरेडी लॉसेस में रन कर रही है, एंड इट वॉज नॉट पॉसिबल फॉर द गवर्नमेंट टू रिवाइव ईच एंड एवरी इंडस्ट्री. Okay, so this is what the meaning of privatization is. So here it means a gradual withdrawal of the government ownership or management from the public sector enterprises. It may happen in two ways. So what is the first way? Outright sale of the government enterprise to the private players, means you can completely sell the public sector company to the private businessmen. Then the second point in this privatization can be withdrawal of the government ownership and management from the mixed enterprises. This enterprise is jointly owned and managed by the government and the private players. So basically there were some enterprises which were being controlled by both by this government and the private sector. So government even withdrawn from that, and completely the ownership was given into the hand of this private entrepreneurs. So this is how the government has reduced even its involvement in this kind of companies. So this is also a private kind of thing, because here how the government will come out, simply they are going to sell their share to this private businessmen only. So this is how they can be done, because even this mixed or joint kind of partnership kind of things, which means the mixed enterprises were there, like Maruti Udyog, Maruti Udyog or Maruti Suzuki was there. So Maruti Udyog is Indian, and Suzuki is Japanese. So you can see that there's a mixed enterprises. So what they did, they sold the share to the private players now. So this is how they got removed themselves from this kind of industries, and this is how the privatization took place. Now the need of privatization, why the government was simply selling its share to the private players. So is there a need to do like that? Even today they are selling that they want to make this railway also privatized. So what is the need for doing this? So here there also at that time also there was some need of this privatization. So why, we are going to learn now. So the first thing, the process of industrialization was initiated during the second 5-year plans, assigning a key role to the public sector units. So what happened? The process of this industrialization was initiated when we started this first 5-year plan. You remember the first 5-year plan focused on agriculture sector. Then this second 5-year plan focused on industries. So basically there was need of privatization because it was a part of our second 5-year plan. We need to help them. So that is why there's a need for privatizations. So what happened? So at that time what happened? The key role was with the public sector units. Now what happened? They were not performing well. So there was need to make them private. Now here in this second point, The Industrial Policy Resolution IPR 1956, this clearly and categorically stated the importance of the PSU in the process of growth and development. So it was decided in the IPR in 1956 that they will be doing welfare. So there was more emphasis laid on this public sector companies. So they will be doing this welfare and all. So it was like an importance which has been given that they will be coming forward. So government companies will come forward in this for this growth and development of the nation, because they'll be doing welfare and they'll not be focusing on profit maximization for sure. So there was basically some good companies, इसके अंदर कुछ अच्छी कंपनियां भी थी जिनको गवर्नमेंट ने प्राइवेटाइज नहीं किया. So they are basically called as Navratna. So this Navratna companies were there, like BHEL was there, Bharat Hindustan Electrical Limited, Steel Authority India Limited, Videsh Sansar Nigam Limited, VSNL was there. So all these Navratna companies जितनी भी थी इनको प्राइवेटाइज नहीं किया गया था, okay, under this IPR. So because of this, because they were having some importance in our economy. Okay, now in the third point, it is beyond doubt that it was through the spread of PSU that India could diversify its industrial base. Now what happened, because of this Navratna or public sector units, the India was able to diversify the industries. Because of this public sector unit, what happened, many other industries also came into in India of different types. Then the next point, it was on the account of the spread of PSU that the Indian economy underwent a structural transformation. People started shifting from agriculture to the industry as a source of livelihood. Now what happens here, the people were changing their jobs from the agriculture sector to this industrial sector, because in the first 5 year plan we were focusing on the agriculture, and in the second 5 year plan we were focusing on the industries. So the people started coming from this agriculture sector to this industrial sector, because they were changing their employment level, because the employment now also been provided here in this industries now. So they were looking for jobs there. So this was kind of a structural change which was happened because of this public sector units or government enterprises. And there was a gradual increase in the percentage contribution of the industry to the GDP. Now this GDP and this contribution of industry also led to the growth of GDP of the country here. So PSU gave us Navratna, nine gems of the Indian industries, beside the host of many Ratna. So here this PSU gave us Navratna, which I already stated some names, NTPC and Oil India Limited, Coal India Limited, all these are Navratna, VSNL. So these were been provided by this public sector units. So all this structural change from this agriculture to this industrial sector, the people were getting employment. So all these things were basically because of this Navratna. And these Navratna, as I told you earlier, these were not privatized. इसको प्राइवेटाइज नहीं किया गया गवर्नमेंट के द्वारा. Okay, now slowly or gradually, most public sector enterprises turned into a social deadweight or the socially liability, mounting the losses of PSU become unsustainable. Now what happened? Some of the public sector units, कुछ government companies थी जो कि continuously losses में run कर रही थी, and it was like a burden for the government. So it was just like a burden, and it was not possible for the government to revive it back. उसको वापस से investment करके वापस जान ला देना उस company में, it was not possible for the government. So government sold that share of that particular loss making public enterprises to the private players. उसके शेयरों को private players को बेच दिया गया था यहाँ पे. Okay, now the leakage, pilferage, inefficiency and corruption has become so rampant. Yeah, rampant means ज़्यादा in public sector units that their privatization was considered as the only remedy. Now all this corruption was there. Inefficiency means there was a loss of or no, improper use of resources was there. Leakage means some goods were also been stolen by them. कुछ goods चोरी भी हो जाता था. So because of all these kind of things, the government decided there is no need to save this kind of industry because already so much corruption is there. So it is a good remedy, means let's sell the share of this kind of company to the private players and they will take care of it. तो इस तरह से उन्होंने शेयरों को प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को बेच दिया, इस तरह की पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस को. Now after this, the seventh point, accordingly in 1991 the government decided to phase out the public enterprises by selling its equity to the private enterprises, and privatization was to replace public ownership at a large number of enterprises. Now, after according to this 1991 गवर्नमेंट ने क्या डिसाइड किया कि जितने भी पब्लिक एंटरप्राइजेस हैं उसके शेयर्स प्राइवेट प्लेयर्स को बेच दिए गए. So the same thing I was telling you, this is the meaning of privatization given over here. Now 8 point. However, in the view of their efficient performance, Navratna were to be retained as a public sector enterprises. Indeed, the government decided to upgrade their functional freedom with a view to enhancing their competitive strength. Now, what happened? The government did not privatize this Navratna. It was being saved by the government here. Government ने बचा लिया Navratna companies को, but they upgraded the performance for this growth and all. उन्होंने सारी industry को Navratna को upgrade किया. Means in sense of technology and all upgradation किया गया. उसको पैसा लगा के reinvest करके उसको और अच्छा बेहतर बनाया गया. Government has really focused on this Navratna because these Navratna were the companies which were running into profit और खूब कमा के दिया गवर्नमेंट को. तो दैट इज हाउ गवर्नमेंट ने इनको प्राइवेटाइज नहीं किया और थोड़ा सा करा भी है तो थोड़ा सा पार्शियली किया. मीन्स पूरे शेयर प्राइवेट को नहीं बेच दिए उन्होंने. ओके. नाउ आफ्टर दिस the obvious gains and imperative losses of these privatizations. So what are the gains here? Privatization से मिला क्या? So privatization implies supremacy of the self-interest over the social interest. When this self-interest prevails, the entrepreneur work with 100% commitment and efficiency become the condition for survival of the workers. Now, all these private companies, they were simply working on the matters of self-interest now. What happened now? Everything was privatized, so they were giving their 100%. Private companies अपना 100% दे रही थी, and they were working with self-interest. Mean they were focusing on the more profit maximization now. They were really working hard in order to get more and more profits. So this is how they showed their commitment and efficiency. And the conditions for the workers, it's just like worker को काम करना पड़ता था if they want to survive. So इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, एक बहुत हाई प्रोडक्टिविटी दिखी थी प्राइवेट सेक्टर की. So this was a good impact of privatization. So this is a kind of thing which really boost up the GDP of the country. Now second point, privatization expects private enterprises to work in a competitive environment, both domestic as well as international. Competition induces upgradation and modernization. So what happened? The competition here was increased because of the involvement of this private sector. So everybody was upgrading and modernizing their industry here. Then the third point, privatization promote diversification of production. Unlike the PSU, public sector enterprises generate high profit. These are used for expansion and diversification of the production. Diversification of the production here. So here what happened, because of this privatization, now we can see the diversification of the production. Means today the companies are manufacturing so many different types of goods. So because this is called as the diversification of the production, it was possible only because of this presence of this private players in the market. Otherwise earlier the PSU was not focusing on giving you the variety of product. They were focusing only on few or making some few items or products only for the market. So but now we can see a variety of product in the market because of these private players. And other one will also be, doesn't matter whatever or PSU whatever you are, you will have to make or diversify your production. So MNCs or multinational corporations are a testimony to the fact that the private sector enterprises are capable for defining the benchmark of the growth. So here they're talking about this MNC, multinational company, and this all this multinational company are already producing so many different variety of product available in the market which the consumer can buy, and they are having so many choices. Now, after this, the fourth point, the privatization promote consumer sovereignty. Means consumer is sovereign in this privatization. Means consumer is treated as the king of the market, and the company will be making the product keeping in the mind the needs of the consumer. Now, what are the imperative losses of this privatization? There are some negative points also. So, socialistic pattern of the society in which social interest was accorded top priority is left to the survival only as a theoretical possibility. Loses its a practical relevance once PSU are sold off the private enterprises. Now, what happened when this PSU was sold to the private players? All this social interest or welfare kind of things was gone. So, this was the negative impact which can be seen. In the second point, the privatization encourages the free play of the market forces, but in the process, goods are produced only for those who have means to buy them. When prices rise, so weaker sections of the society suffer deprivations. Now what happens here, if private players will be making, so definitely they will make product for only for those people who have capacity to buy them. Okay, so this is the kind of thing which you can say that all those people who cannot buy or weaker sections are there in the society, they will not be able to buy such kind of products. So this is a negative impact. So whenever the prices will be high, the weaker section will remain deprived of many articles. So circular tragedy is mentioned here, so we'll be later on we'll be learning about it. So here it is given. So it happened in Andhra Pradesh. If in 1 mark question comes, so Sarsila tragedy कहाँ हुई थी? In Sarsila, Andhra Pradesh में हुई थी, ठीक है. So it's a small town known for its power loom industry. Okay, handmade products बनाते थे वो. So this industry was the main source of livelihood for many people. ये काफी लोगों को employment देती थी. Privatization for power supply to this industry led to the substantial hike in power tariff, implying a sustainable burden on the industry. जब ये पावर टैरिफ यानी कि जो पावर जो मिलती है इलेक्ट्रिसिटी उस वो जब महंगी हुई, तो ये बर्डन हो गया इंडस्ट्री के ऊपर. सो उनके वेजेस को कट कर दिया गया था. ओके, वेजेस यानी कि जो पैसा मिलता था वर्कर्स को उसको कट कर दिया गया. सो एज द वेजेस फॉर लिंक टू द प्रोडक्शन ऑफ क्लॉथ विच हैज टू बी सफर्ड अ ह्यूज डिक्लाइन. अभी जो वेजेस थे ना वो लिंक थे प्रोडक्शन के साथ में, ठीक है. तो जब प्रोडक्शन गिरा तो उनके वेजेस भी गिर गए. तो वेजेस आर कट बियॉन्ड द सब्सटेंस, मतलब लोगों को जीवन जीने में भी प्रॉब्लम आने लग गई थी वहाँ पर. सो व्हाट दिस वर्कर डू, इन्होंने वर्कर्स ने क्या किया, दे कमिटेड सुसाइड एंड दिस सुसाइड इज कॉल्ड एज द सरसीला ट्रेजेडी विच हैपेंड इन आंध्र प्रदेश. सो 50 लोग, करीबन 50 पीपल्स ने सुसाइड कर लिया था यहाँ पर. नाउ ग्लोबलाइजेशन विल बी आवर नेक्स्ट टॉपिक, विल लर्निंग इन दिस इन द न्यू वीडियो. एक और वीडियो मैं भेजूंगा आपको, उसमें आप उसको देख सकते हैं और उसमें कुछ भी डाउट होता है आप मुझसे व्हाट्सएप पे पूछ सकते हैं. ओके, सो थैंक यू, दैट्स ऑल फॉर टुडे.